All right, well, we've got a pretty good number of people in here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm Nate Anderson. I'm a technical analyst with Fruition Partners, and today we're going to be looking at going over the Runbook automation in ServiceNow. Specifically, we're going to kind of go over what is Runbook automation. We'll touch on a few subjects on what it can do for you guys in your environments, and then we'll actually look at a Runbook in action and see what that process looks like and actually kind of follow it along. To start off, we're just going to touch on a little bit of history here with Fruition Partners. We were founded in 2003 as specialists in IT service management. Initially, we were focused on the finance industry, but as ITIL became more broadly adopted, we have expanded into many different sectors such as law, healthcare, we've done retail, a few various education establishments, different universities, as well as into the manufacturing area with textiles and steel manufacturing. We've been very successful with a 40% growth rate over the past 2 years. Additionally, our IT consultants are ITIL certified, but we are not ITIL academics. We have a strong practical skills, and over the last 7 years, we have taken what we've learned from all of our implementations, everything from ITIL, and done everything we can to make it better, and are constantly evolving our processes to ensure we're always staying ahead of the curve. We are a complete IT service integration company. We've got a full menu of services such as education, various training courses. We've actually helped ServiceNow develop their training courses that are offered throughout the year, as well as ones we offer directly in the Chicago area out of our office. We do have a team of ServiceNow developers who are very experienced at developing and implementing processes within ServiceNow. These processes can be anything from standard IT, from change management, all the way up to human resources and facilities purchasing. You know, it's kind of that part where ServiceNow is evolving as a platform as a service. There is, no limits. If there's any process out there that you guys want to define and have tracked in ServiceNow, that type of stuff can be set up and delivered. So to get into why we're all here today, what is Runbook automation? Well, it's the best thing since sliced bread. More specifically, it automates IT tasks within your environment. They can be simple or complex, affecting multiple servers or devices within your infrastructure. It does let your unskilled techs or employees do very skilled things. So, you know, something that you might not want to open up to your regular employees that is more administrative driven. Runbook automation can be a way to open up some of those tasks to those techs and provide a really defined process. It is fully integrated with the ServiceNow platform, so you'll be working, entirely within that platform to set up everything once the mid server is in place. And some of the systems that RBA can automate, we've got VMware out there. Any system that presents a web service, ServiceNow can speak to it and interact. And then we can also work with command line, such as SSH or PowerShell. Some stuff coming soon is there is some work being done to implement Runbook activities that can work directly with Active Directory, such as disabling user accounts, creating new ones, so some of that identity management stuff. So why should we use RBA? Value. Less labor and skill required, and we free up our administrators from routine tasks. By defining in Runbook a process that is, commonly done, or something that might be relatively complex, but a lot of times administrators are sitting there waiting for things to happen if they're doing installations or processes. This can free it up. They fire off a particular Runbook, and that's going to go do all the work for them while they go on to more meaningful tasks. Speed is another part. We do get immediate execution, so as soon as you hit go on that Runbook, unless there are any approvals that need to be accounted for as part of that Runbook to make sure we're not just going crazy out there, they do execute immediately. There's not really any lag time there. Reliability, we got by setting up Runbooks, you'll be able to define your process and best practices in your environment every time. So what that's going to do is ensure that each time a Runbook gets ran, it's going to be the same Runbook every time, instead of Administrator 1, Administrator 2, or Administrator 3 doing it differently. or slightly differently each time that particular process needs to be applied. It does also help you capture the knowledge of that process right in the runbook. So whatever that process actually looks like and what skills are involved to accomplish it, you can set right up in the runbook, and that actually becomes your documentation of what that process looks like. And it does also provide some audit information out there for those where that is a key driver. It does allow you to audit who's kicking off those runbooks, what that whole runbook process looked like for that particular run. So lots of information there to help kind of track down what might be going on or failing. So why should we not use RBA or Runbook? There are some things that should not be automated. Mostly we don't want to use RBA when the development cost is greater than the benefits. I mean, the benefits are obvious. We're going to save a lot of time. You know, you're going to free up admins, all that kind of stuff. But sometimes the work effort to get there can be really expensive. It may not be worth it if we're looking at a process that's used maybe once every 4 to 5 months, 6 months. If there's a lot of development time involved to get that process in place and we only use it sparingly, it doesn't provide really any benefit there. You know, documenting it's good, but something that's going to take a lot of time to get set up in ServiceNow and define, capturing all the knowledge, setting up the workflow, and then all the process around implementing it, including testing and all that kind of stuff. We want to make sure it doesn't exceed or get too costly for the benefit we're looking to get out of it. So we're going to look at some of what Runbook in ServiceNow looks like and what's involved and what gets added to your instance when you have it turned on. It does extend the workflow application in ServiceNow, so all of your runbooks will be designed through that workflow editor for those that are familiar with it. And it adds a bunch of extra activities to it. And these activities are grouped in what are known as process packs, such as VMware, SSH, PowerShell. They've added some Amazon EC2 connectivity there to set up and work with the Amazon cloud. PowerShell, you know, lots of options, and ServiceNow is constantly adding more, such as Active Directory, which is on its way. So what does a runbook look like? It's like any other workflow in ServiceNow, only it really actually does what it's showing you. Instead of, you know, some of the other workflows, they just create tasks which help get work done. They're not really actually going out to your environment and doing anything. Runbook adds that functionality. For this example that we're going to look at today, we're going to look at restarting a server that's here at my house in my office that I'm working out of. And we've got some options in there for restarting it. We're going to get the IP address from different areas. So we're going to go through kind of creating an incident and kicking off what that looks like. So some of the recommended skills. When working with Runbook, it's really helpful if you've got some folks that are familiar with what that Runbook is going to be used for. So if you're looking at implementing something around Linux or Unix, having some folks that are really familiar with SSH scripting that can work with your ServiceNow administrators to help get the processes in there. Same thing with PowerShell for those that want to modify or manage Windows servers. There is some VMware connectivity directly into the vCenter application. There's an API that ServiceNow uses and calls directly into it for creating your VMware images and instances. Same thing with Windows and Linux server administration. That kind of follows back to PowerShell. Want to make sure you're following good practices there. So someone who's got experience managing or administering Windows servers is another great thing to really have. Same thing with the desktop side of stuff. So there's the servers, but through ServiceNow's Runbook automation, there is some install application type activities that run out there where you can look at installing applications on any Windows server that exists out in your environment, or Windows, let me rephrase that, Windows operating system that exists in your environment that can run PowerShell. So some of the architecture behind Runbook, it does utilize the mid server. For those that are unfamiliar with what the mid server is, it's basically the connection between your network and ServiceNow. So the kind of structure you're seeing on the right side, you've got ServiceNow, which exists out there in the cloud. Then you've got your company's firewall, and past your firewall and inside your network, you've got the mid server. And that mid server is what then goes and connects to all of your network gear, your IT systems, computers, basically everything that's out there. So instead of having to open up your entire network, you just open up one little connection between the mid server and ServiceNow. And specifically, that's over the HTTPS SOAP protocol. Oops, sorry about that. So what it also utilizes is what are called probe technologies, which provides integrations with VMware, SOAP, SSH. The probes are basically in ServiceNow what does all the work. So to look at what the actual RBA activities do and what they actually are kind of doing behind the scenes, they write a probe record to what's known as the ECC queue in ServiceNow. So when it writes that record, it's going to pause in the workflow while that probe executes. And then when that probe gets done out there, that mid server is going to grab it. And once the mid server grabs it, it's going to look at what work it needs to do and execute it based on the information in that probe. And then it's going to send those results back to the ServiceNow instance via what's called a sensor. And then the runbook activity is going to continue analyzing, and analyze the results that came back from that sensor script. So whether it was successful, whether it failed, or if you're running PowerShell scripts directly or SSH scripts directly, it's going to report back all the information that was printed on the screen when that script ran. So you'll be able to kind of analyze that information and parse through it to do some highly custom function in the runbook. And then once it's done analyzing it, it's going to exit with a possible condition. Some of them are built in, and some are from sensor scripts. So we'll look at a few of the built-in ones that get outputted back in the example we're going to look at. So what we're going to go into next is basically that live demonstration of the runbook itself. Basically set up a real simple example for us today. It's basically, I've created a user right here called Joe IT Server Rebooter, and he's going to create a new incident for us. And so somebody may be calling into the environment, and they're saying, hey, I'm unable to access a website. And so he's going to sign that off. So this tech that's working on it, he's going to get in the call and he's going to go, okay, well, our server guys probably need to look at that. So he's going to sign it off to server management. And in our example, Joe IT Server Rebooter also happens to be a part of the server management team. So I'm going to go ahead and save this record into ServiceNow. And then what I've added to help us facilitate in this is there's a UI action that we're going to leverage to restart the configuration item specified on this particular ticket. So if I scroll down, in my example, I've added it as a link at the bottom of the form, so that way we don't clutter up all the buttons along the top of the form. So there's just this simple restart server link out here. So when I click on that, it's actually going to go look at the configuration item that's associated with this particular ticket, and it's going to run a workflow in the background. So if I click this show workflow link up here, it's going to show me the runbook that's running in the background that I kicked off by clicking that restart server link. And in our example here, we can actually see the start area, and we've got this big red guy out here where it failed. So it actually had an error of some kind and was unable to resolve the IP address based on a DNS name. So to account for that, in the event that for some reason DNS fails or can't find it, we've set up another activity out here to kind of be a catch-all. So it's going to get the IP address from the CMDB record we specified on that ticket and use it instead. So if for some reason you can't DNS, we're going to next try and get that IP address and then move forward. So then we're going to add a work note to the ticket, letting them know the server reboot is starting. So if I come back over to our incident, and if you guys heard that in the background, that was the workstation restarting for us. So I'm going to reload the form for us here, and then we can see some of the logs that get captured there. So these, I kind of left these out here as examples. I wanted them to kind of show up this way. So here we can see where we've kind of informed the person that executed this that they're restarting the server, and then we would dynamically plug in that server's name so we know what's going on there. And then we'll have an IP address of the IP that got resolved or found through that script. So that way we can dump out some extra information in the work notes so people know what's going on. And then we flag another activity that says the reboot process was successful when it actually completes it. So if I look back at this workflow and refresh it, we can see we've kicked along. We've actually successfully restarted the server. The reboot was completed, so this is where we're adding that work note, and then we hit the end. And then you can see that in case there was some sort of failure, we're capturing that too, where we'd actually add another work note letting them know that that failure happened. And we could add another activity in here where we might assign it off to another group to manage that failure and see if they can get the server back online. So I see we have a few questions out here. Let's see if we can grab those here. We'll get to questions here in a minute, guys. I'll touch on the two that are out there, and we'll head over those. So one of the other things I kind of want to show you guys while we've got some time and while we're out here at the live demonstration is more of what's going on in the background. So if I come back over to an administrator that can actually look at some of the background stuff, when ServiceNow is firing off those probes that we were talking about earlier, it stores them in what's called the ECC queue. So I've typed ECC in my filter text, and alternatively I can scroll down and go to the Runbook automation application, and I can look at that queue that's going on in the background. So we can see some of the scripting that's going on here, where we've got these input records and some of these output records. The input records are those probes that get fired out that say do some work. And then the output records are what are sent back from the mid server, letting us know that that work has been completed. So this is where it's basically logging all of that work that's being done, which can, at the end of the day, becomes a large portion of your audit trail of who's doing what, doing it where, at what times, and what's being fired off in your environment. That kind of ends the live demonstration that I had set up for you guys. The runbooks, they can get much more complex than just restarting a server. That was just a really, really simple example of what can be done there. But the sky's kind of the limit. If there's something that you can do via PowerShell scripting or sorry, I was reading a question that came up. We'll get to that in just a minute as well. We've got 2 more slides I want to just kind of touch on for you guys, and then we'll hop into answering some of these questions and really dig into what's going on there. So we'll have some prime examples to answer those questions you guys have out there. So again, the process packs that are out there, and we'll dig into this when we get onto one of the questions out here as to where these show up at. But there's a VMware process pack out of the box, which gives you some access to clone out a template, power VMs up and down. You can configure a VM, take a snapshot, revert to a snapshot, or destroy one. And then PowerShell has some other similar activities where we can install applications, join systems to the domain, a couple out-of-box ones, or you can run any kind of PowerShell script that you want. And that kind of ends what I had set up for everyone today. Runbook's one of those parts where getting into some of the questions that we have out there really drives kind of what can be shown and what can be done there. So we'll go ahead and step into the 3 I have out there. And if anyone else has questions, just feel free to type them in. No question is too simple or too straightforward. Anything's welcome. And we'll touch on as many as we can here. So the first question I have is, do we know if there's interfaces with Google in the pipeline? I am unaware of any that are out there. The only caveat I could give to that as far as getting something in there today would be if Google offers any of its APIs via web services. I'm not too familiar with what Google has in that area, but if there's a web service type call that can be done there, that would be the initial way to interface with Google today. But as far as ServiceNow creating some activities that'll be available out of box, that's a good idea. I'll keep that one down and pass it on to them as an idea to get them spooling into those. So I got another question about modifying the scripts for the mid server. I guess, can you provide a little bit more detail around that? the MID server itself doesn't really have scripts that sit on it. It does have some Java libraries and Java packets that sit out there that are being called from the ServiceNow instance. But as far as the scripting that goes into runbooks, that's all done right in the runbooks themselves, or you can create custom ones as well. But in the meantime, I'm going to go and skip on to the next question, and then whoever asked the one about can I modify the script for MID server, if you can throw in a follow-up question with maybe a little bit more detail there. If you're referring to the MID server itself that's sitting out in your environment, or what ServiceNow is going to be running on the runbook, that'd be great. So the next question we have out here is showing where all the scripts or commands to restart the server for an activity is written. So what we can get into there is ServiceNow does offer and completely allow you to add as many activities as you want. So actually, let's start off in the workflow editor application, and then I'm actually going to open my restart server workflow that we were looking at a moment ago. So if we look at the workflow that we've got out up here, we can see kind of all the stuff that was being checked and ran. And this activity, really most of the activities that are out here are all available to you to go in and modify or expand or duplicate and make them do different things. So if I were to add this out here to it, over here on the right side, when you turn the Runbook automation on, you're going to get a whole bunch of applications that added, or activities more specifically, added to your workflow capabilities. And the one that I used was this restart Windows Server activity. So when I drag that out onto the workflow itself, it's going to ask me some basic information. In this case, I'm actually passing over a specific hostname IP address to it to ease with the demonstration today. But here you could put in a dynamically resolved, the IP address of the configuration item that was found, and have it, be completely dynamic on what's going on there. So some real simple information on this restart Windows Server one. As far as where the scripts are ran, or more specifically where the scripts are configured that does all this work. So when you're looking at the activity, it's real simple information. It's not showing you any of the actual kind of code that's going on in the background. While I think we'll have a lot of time to really delve into the nitty-gritty of what's going on into it. Where ServiceNow stores all that information is under this workflow header right here, and then under activity definitions. You can also get to it under Runbook automation as well. But if we look in this list, this is basically where ServiceNow defines all of the activities that show up in that right column whenever you're in the workflow editor. So some of these look really familiar for those that have been using the workflow application so far, like approval group, approval user. More specifically, the question was around the restart server one, so we'll take a look at that guy. So here's that restart Windows Server activity. It's basically running a lot of Java in the background, or JavaScript, basically creating classes. So this is where all that script lives to get in and actually modify what it's doing if you really wanted to change it, or see what it's doing and duplicate some of them or expand upon them. This stuff's completely available for people to expand upon and duplicate, make as many activities out there that makes sense to have. So this restart Windows Server was actually one that ServiceNow didn't have when Runbook went live, and was one that they added. And during our training course for it, it was an activity that we actually added as part of one of our labs. So lots of extensibility here to add whatever types of activities that you would want to add out there. As far as good ideas for activities, the only thing I would really look at would be an activity would be something that's a real global type of work being done, like restarting a Windows server, where you're going to be passing it really dynamic information. So that's where you can come in and actually get in here and really define what's going on. So we can see the command that it's running is basically building the PowerShell script to actually restart the server. So if anyone on the call is familiar with PowerShell, these lines of code might look really familiar. So it's just, if you wanted to make a real simple change to what it's doing here, you would just basically replace all the information that's in this command little variable right here, and whatever needed to be in there would be what you would have. So the next question we have out here is, when installing applications on remote systems, can we control the bandwidth so we don't saturate a network? To be honest, that's one area I have not looked into. The installing applications activities are pretty new, but it utilizes PowerShell to do it. So if you're installing the applications on multiple remote systems, I would expect it to saturate your network probably a decent amount. I don't think it leverages any of the bits functionality like System Center Configuration Manager might leverage to transfer that type of information. It's really just a PowerShell script that takes in some parameters and then runs that installation file in your environment, and then kind of passes the parameters of what machine it's going to be in there and stuff. So it looks like we got a message from one of the guys out there listening to that one. So if we do want to manage the bandwidth on there, it's managed in an area around the number of threads in the mid server that it can do at any one time. 25 is the default, but you can turn that number down. That's located in the configuration.xml file. So that would be where you could go in there, and if you noticed it using a lot of bandwidth for that particular mid server that's running those applications, you could turn down the thread count, and that would help alleviate some of the network bandwidth as well. All right, are there any other questions out there from anyone? I think I've covered all the ones that are out there. All right, well, if there are any other questions that people do have or they come up with after the fact, feel free to let us know. We'll be glad to get out there and answer those questions for you guys. We will have this webinar recording posted on our Fruition site as well. The one last thing I want to show you guys is the wiki pages that do exist out there for it. The October release does have a lot of stuff coming. I don't know if Active Directory is part of it. I do notice that Active Directory is out on the wiki as far as what types of commands can be ran, but it is not in my instance currently with the most recent, I think, October Preview 2 release. So we can look here at the stuff that's coming out in the October 2011. So this is the current release candidate that's out there. It looks like we're going to be adding the Linux user password, reset AD user passwords, so some extra activities out there. And then this page out here has a listing of and description of all the Runbook activities that exist currently today, or that will be at the very least included by the time the October release comes out. So we've got all the SSH commands out there. We've got VMware at the bottom. We're going to have PowerShell. That most of these are already out there. Change service state. Those should be coming along as well in the October release that we've got coming out. But again, on the wiki, there's just tons and tons of information out there. Just search on Runbook. We'll hit that top article. It's going to have a lot of kind of general information about Runbook out there, some notable upcoming changes that are out there, and again, some of the pictures and examples and demonstrations. You can find them out here on the wiki article as well. Definitely a great place to get information and kind of collect everything together. All right, again, thanks guys for joining, and ladies, if there are any out there. I hope you guys have a wonderful afternoon, and again, feel free to hit us up on the Twitter, Facebook. We've got all that out there available for everyone to follow up on, and we'll be glad to get back to you guys with any questions that you might have. And again, have a great day.